Welcome back everyone for another POV flight in the PC-12. This is a Series 10 Legacy. This was shot back in November of 2019. And I'm on approach into Cedar Rapids, Iowa here, CID, the Eastern Iowa Airport. And I'm being vectored around south of the airport for the ILS-27. There's a scattered to broken layer, very thin layer beneath me that you'll see here in just a minute. And so they were using the ILS approach to 27 on this day, and if I recall, I think I'll get below the layer, get the field in sight, and get the visual, but for now I'm setting up for the ILS to 27, so I'm just briefing the approach. You can see the approach plate that I have pulled up on ForeFlight there, and I'm getting set up for that. There's that thin layer that you can see I'm descending toward there. So I'm just turning on the prop heat for that, as we are well within the ice range on this cold November day in Iowa, so got the inertial separator open and the prop heat on to descend through that layer, just in case there's any ice in there. And just getting the approach configured. And I'm already on a vector there, looks like maybe a 070 heading. About 235 knots. So it's always a good idea to brief the approach even if you don't think you'll need it. Just in the event that you do need it, you're ready to go. Just shooting across the top of that cloud there. So as you can see, it's a good VFR. Just to have that higher scattered to broken layer there. So as soon as I get beneath this layer, I'll see if I can get the airport in sight. I'll start to turn around and look over my left shoulder there to see if I can find the airport and get the visual approach, so I don't have to fly extra miles to get vectored around for the full ILS. A couple of bumps descending through those clouds. So you can see on the GTN 750 there on the big moving map to the right that I'm just south of the airport, so I'm already looking over in that direction to see if I might be able to spot the field, but I couldn't see it because of those clouds. So I'm on a kind of a modified left downwind vector here at 4,000, leveled off, and I just have maximum torque here, so about 230 knots or so. ITT's nice and low at this lower altitude with all that cold air. And we're bumping around in these clouds. These cumuliform clouds are almost always bumpy, so if they're really bumpy you want to slow down as you go through them, but they weren't so bad this day. And I'm actually empty. This was a Part 91 leg empty. I was flying out here to Cedar Rapids to pick up some passengers, so it's just me in the airplane, single pilot, nobody in the back. So I'm not too concerned about the bumps. If you have passengers on board, you want to try to give them a good ride and slow down and avoid those bumps the best you can. But if it's just me in the airplane, I'm not overly concerned with it. Just want to make sure that it's safe, but I don't mind a little bit of a bumpy ride. I spent a little bit of time as a freight dog, so as a freight dog, you get plenty used to flying in bad weather and turbulence, so it doesn't bother me all that much. So I'm just kind of hanging out in this layer now. Soon I'll get a descent and get below the bases and take a look around, see if we can get the field in sight. And I think I did get the field in sight and got the visual, and I was able to shave off a couple of miles and just go direct to the numbers pretty much after I got the field in sight. So you can see you have ground contact there. It's a very thin layer. Looks like I'm getting a descent there, so I'm dialing in probably 3,000 in the altitude pre-select. And I'll start down and get below the bases. So Cedar Rapids is a Class Charlie airport, but it's pretty slow. They do have airline service there, but there's not a lot of traffic, so you can usually go fast and they don't slow you down. So I'm starting to look to my left there to see if I can see the runway. I think maybe I can see it right there. So I'm probably letting approach now. I've got the field in sight. I'm requesting the visual. And I think I just got cleared for the visual, so I'm rolling in a base leg heading there, and I just selected heading mode on the autopilot, so now I'm navigating on my own And I'll just make kind of a big U-turn back around toward the runway here and try to line up a couple miles out on final. So it's just a little bit more expeditious than flying all the way out to get vectored for the ILS. Why do that if you don't need to? So didn't pick up any ice in those clouds, so I'm turning off the prop heat. No ice on the airplane, so I don't need to keep the pusher in ice mode. And of course I'll keep the inertial separator open just for FOD and bird strike protection. So I just pulled up the airport diagram there on ForeFlight, so I'm ready to go after I do get on the runway, and I know where to taxi. That's something I always brief ahead of time to know at least which direction I'm turning off the runway and then my anticipated taxi route into the FBO. And you can see the localizer and glide slope there on the EHSI because I do still have that approach tuned in. And so I'm setting up for a nice intercept there onto the localizer a couple miles out. And as I mentioned in my last POV video, it's always a good idea to back up a visual approach with an instrument approach just to make sure that you're lined up with the right runway and at the right airport. And it's nice to get that vertical guidance as well. So the glide slope's alive. So I'll just start to track that down using vertical speed mode on the autopilot, and I'll just pull the power out to maintain about 210 knots, and I'll start slowing down here pretty soon to get some flaps out. With all that snow on the ground, it can be a little bit hard to find the airport. Luckily, Cedar Rapids is a large airport, so the runways are nice and big. It's not too hard to pick them out. But when there's snow on the ground, it can be pretty difficult to find the smaller airports. So that's another reason to use an instrument approach and your moving map and all the tools that you have at your disposal to make sure you can find the airport and the right airport. So you can see I'm slowing down to about 180 knots right there. Descending at about 1,000 feet per minute or so. Just following that glide slope down. So I'm hand flying at this point and just getting it trimmed up. And slowing down to VFE for flaps 15, which is 163 knots, and the Legacy, 165 in the NG. And I'm selecting gear down there, taxi landing lights on. So VLO for the Legacy is 177, so if you're at flap speed, you're also at gear speed. There's 3 green, no red. So we're configured for the approach now. I did this a little bit early on this day. You wouldn't have to do that this far out. But if I'm not in a rush, you know, sometimes I'll just slow down a little bit farther out. And of course, if you're in a rush, you still don't want to, you know, do anything unsafe. You know, you can fly the airplane a little more expeditiously and still well within the confines of safety, but you might, you know, carry a little bit more speed until you're a little bit closer in. But if you've got all the time in the world like I did this day, I was plenty early for picking up my passengers, then you can just slow down a little bit ahead of time. So just backing up my flows with the before landing checklist here, make sure I didn't miss anything. Double checking the lights. So you can see runway 27 out there, nice big long runway. So I'm cleared to land at this point. Nice smooth day. Just a couple bumps in that cloud layer. So slowing down now to final approach speed. And in the Legacy, and the NG for that matter, we just use the fast slow pointer on the E80i, and you can kind of barely see it there. It's tough to see with the flickering on the E80i, but there's a pointer on the left side on that scale. It's a vertical scale, and there's a circle in the middle of that scale that we call the donut, and that's 1.3 times your stall speed in the current configuration, which is usually right around 80 knots for final approach speed. So we just use that as a reference for our landing reference speed. So I'm just slowing down to about that speed, getting it trimmed out. I've got flaps 30 now. And as I mentioned in my last video, flaps 30 is the normal flap setting for landing in the PC-12. Flaps 40 is really only reserved for short fields or unimproved surfaces where you really want to get all the kinetic energy out before you touch that rough surface. But normally we land flaps 30 or flaps 15 if there's a lot of wind. So one last check of the gear, 3 green, crossing the fence here. And I'm just going to ease the power out here, raise the nose into the flare here. And as I recall, I don't think there was any traffic behind me this day, so I was able to kind of take my time on the rollout. Sometimes at these larger international airports, if there's an airliner right, coming up your butt, you need to hurry off the runway so you don't force a go around for them. But I think on this day I was kind of the only one here, so I'm just going to roll down to this next taxiway exit on the right. So no need for reverse, really not much need for beta, certainly no need for brakes, just kind of letting the friction of the tires on the concrete slow me down here, and I'll just make the right turn off the runway. So you can see I'm in no hurry, I knew there was no traffic behind me. And we'll make this right turn, clean up here, flaps up. It's the windshield heat and the probe heat off. And turning off the strobes, the landing lights, the recogs, TCAS to standby. And I'm resetting all 3 trims here. So the rudder trim is on the PCL, which is the power control lever or the big throttle in the airplane. It's on the front side of that. There's a split rocker switch that goes left and right for the rudder trim. And then the aileron and the stabilizer trim are both on the left hat switch on the left horn of the yoke. And there's a trigger that you have to pull on the front side of that horn to activate the trim system and then make inputs using that hat switch. So I recentered all 3 trims. Now I'm just running through the after landing checklist, make sure I didn't miss anything. I've got my taxi instructions into the ramp. Pretty simple taxi just down this parallel taxiway. I do have to cross one runway up here. So for runway incursion avoidance, it's always a good idea to go heads up for any runway crossing. Make sure you're not doing anything else, not running a checklist or fiddling with the avionics or anything like that. So I'm clearing left and right, double checking. I turned all the external lights on, verifying my clearance to cross the runway. So heads up and really focus on what you're doing for any runway crossing so you don't make a mistake and blunder across a whole short line when you weren't cleared to do so. Especially single pilot, when you're the only eyes up there, you really have to be careful about that. So turning all the lights off across the runway here, I'll make this left turn into the ramp. And we do have to allow a 2-minute cool down period after the selection of ground idle minimum power on rollout until we shut the engine down, but I'll have no problem getting that in here. I'm sure it's already elapsed since it is not a long taxi, but not a short one today. Still a little bit of snow and ice on the taxiway there you saw. And day or night when we pull into the ramp, if we're being marshaled in, we want to turn off the taxi lights so we don't blind the marshal. Of course, you're not going to blind them during the daytime. It's just kind of a good operating practice to be in so that you don't forget to do that at night so they can actually see what they need to see to marshal you in properly. So in just a minute here, I'll reach up and turn off the taxi light if I didn't already. Turning the EPS off there, I've already turned off the cooling system, so I've kind of gotten everything shut down. There's taxi light off right there. Getting my scratch pad ready to note my fuel burn and hobs. And just making sure I don't clip anything with the right wing there. So you can see my marshal up there. Let's see, I don't remember the FBO. This is maybe signature. So just going nice and slow, taxiing in here. Nice professionalism by the line service guy in the back. There's the stop signal. Parking brake set, avionics off, generators off, condition lever to feather cutoff. Note my fuel burn here. And I'm just gonna take the headset off, shut the camera down, get out, head in, wait for my passengers. And that is it. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you on the next one.